You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk.
Number 352.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoor Station. And apologies once again for being slightly quiet this year so far. However, having said that, we have been very, very busy building a new studio. So all will be revealed within due course, and hopefully you'll be getting a lot more online entertainment very soon. Now, this is the first part of a two-part podcast where one of our contributors, David Linton, chats to Keith Foskett, another passionate long-distance hiker. You may remember David from the Chris Townsend interviews of last year, and with my own interview with him about his Haute Route Pyrenees walk later in 2011. Keith Foskett is a UK thru hiker who has tackled the Camino Santiago in Spain, the Pacific Crest Trail, and now the Appalachian Trail, both of course in the USA. In these podcasts, David chats with him just after he returned from 2,100 miles on the Appalachian Trail. You might recognise Keith's name as he was also nominated and shortlisted this year in the Outdoor Personality category for the first TGO Awards. Of course, there's much more information, photos and videos about his various trips to go with this podcast on www.keithfoskett.com. He's a really humble chap and talks openly about his experiences on the walks, how they changed his outlook about life back home, as well as the practical aspects of the 3 long-distance trails he's completed. He gives a lot of detail about the AT, so if you're thinking about a long-distance walk in the US, this podcast is definitely for you. But we're sure there's enough here to interest all types of backpackers contemplating a long trip anywhere.
So I'm very pleased to be here this evening. We managed to get the technology to work for us, and I'm here with Keith Foskett, otherwise known as Fozzie. Hello, Keith.
Hi, David.
You are just back from safe to say, a really long walk. Tell us about where you've just come back from.
I got back about 3 weeks ago from the Appalachian Trail, which is basically a 2,170-mile hike up the eastern states of America.
So 2,000, I had no idea it was that long, actually. It's nearly 3,000 miles, is it?
No, 2,100.
Oh, 2001, okay, great. Where do you start on that?
It starts in northern Georgia at a place called Springer Mountain, and it finishes on Mount Katahdin, which is in Maine.
And how long did that take you? How long were you out for?
I thought it would take about 6 months, which was a pretty generous allowance. Most people take anything between 4 to 7. I thought it would take 6. If I came in under that, I would have been very, very happy, and I did it in 4 months and 30 days. I kind of got near to about 2 months before the end and thought this could actually be quite good if I did it in under 5 months. If you do it in 4 months and a few weeks or a few days, it's generally considered sort of quite a respectable time to do the AT in. So I suddenly realised I could do it in 4 months and 30 days, and that's how it happened.
Right. What sort of mileage are you doing? Do you have an average mileage, or does it? I mean, I'm guessing it depends on the terrain. But do you clocking averages? You kind of, I suppose you are aware of that at that level of walking.
Yeah, you have to be aware of your mileage. It's not something we really like thinking about it. I mean, half the reason we're out there is to just sort of have fun and enjoy ourselves. Although it is obviously a serious undertaking, you have to have some sort of plan, some sort of battle plan. I normally would do about 20 to 25 miles a day. On my previous hikes, I was plagued by blisters for most of the hikes. So the primary plan on the Appalachian Trail was to ease myself in gently, keep the mileage down, and hopefully the blisters wouldn't sort of crop up. I did 10 miles a day for about 2.5 weeks, which is quite a small amount, especially for a through hiker. But as I say, the plan was to sort of knock the blisters on the head. After about 2.5 weeks, for about a week and a half after that, I went up to 15 miles a day for a couple of weeks, and then pushed it up to about 20 to 25s, which is normally around about where I hovered most days. I went up to 30s. I think I did 4 straight 30s during one stretch.
Ouch.
Yeah. It's not actually too bad. I mean, that was in the middle of the summer, so, you know, a lot of it's down to daylight.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. I mean, what time if you're doing, let's say you're, you know, 2/3 of the way through, let's say you're doing a 22 or 23 mile day, when are you starting, when are you finishing?
The big thing about through hiking is you get up when the sun comes up and you go to bed when the sun goes down, and it's a lovely way to live because you're sort of living, I guess, within nature, but you know, sort of, let's say June, when you're sort of around that midsummer period, and when you've got the most amount of daylight you could wish for, the sun was coming up at about 5 o'clock in the morning, which is normally when I got up.
Mm-hmm.
I normally need about an hour from sort of jumping out of my hammock to cooking and packing everything away to when I actually, you know, step on trail. So I'd normally be walking by 6 a.m. And I'd probably finish maybe 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, something like that. It also does depend on the terrain. You have a rough idea of how much mileage you want to do each day. And if I sort of got to 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening, and let's say, for example, I was hoping to do a 22 for whatever reason to get to a certain point, and I'd only managed to pull in 18, you know, I'd spend maybe 5 minutes reconsidering, do I want to stop here, do I want to carry on?
Sure.
And more often than not, I'd probably push out an extra, you know, 3 or 4 and get to what I want to actually achieve.
How do you go from doing walks, which might be, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks, to thinking about something that is 4 months or 6 months in some of your previous walks? I mean, it's off the scale, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the second really long walk I did, the Pacific Crest Trail, a couple of years ago. There was quite a lot of planning involved in that, but a lot of that was sort of communication-based stuff, you know, setting a website up, setting a blog, which does take a lot of time. Mm-hmm. The Appalachian Trail, strangely enough, there wasn't an awful lot of planning. I guess because I'd done it, you know, a couple of times before and I knew what to expect. The main planning area was trying to get enough money to do it, because I left for the Appalachian Trail at the end of, about the middle of March this year, 2012. And it wasn't probably until beginning mid-February that I realised I could actually probably go and do it, because the main fly in the ointment was money. I didn't think I'd have enough money to actually go and do it. So for 6 months I was, you know, working like a dog and trying to get the bank balance up to some sort of level where I thought, okay, there's enough money there to do a through hike.
Podcasts are based solely around self-powered travel. If you walk, run, cycle, paddle, climb, explore or sail, we want to share your adventure, hear your highs and lows, and inspire others to go out and do more.
What other bits of planning are you doing? Are there guidebooks? Obviously there's maps. How are you getting all that together? How long does that take?
Well, I mean, guidebooks and maps aren't usually too much of an issue. I mean, amazingly enough, most through hikers don't use maps. The big 3 hikes in the States.
Really?
The Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide are pretty well marked. You could conceivably quite easily walk all 3, although I'm not too sure about the Continental Divide because I haven't done it. But certainly on the Pacific Crest Trail and the Appalachian Trail, you could quite easily walk the entire distance and not have access to a map or a guidebook.
Right, that really surprises me. I didn't know that at all. Right.
They're very well marked. It's kind of like, I don't know, maybe doing the South Downs Way over here or the North Downs Way or, the West Highland Way.
Uh-huh.
they're pretty well marked. You know, if you get to an intersection of paths, you can normally expect to have some sort of sign on a tree.
Really? Right. Okay. And
Yes.
what is that? Is that a written sign, or is it just sort of like a European, like a GR sort of red and white flash, or?
The Appalachian Trail, they call them blazes. Generally, you would get sort of a vertical rectangle, white rectangle painted on any sort of medium that would accept it. Most of the time it's trees. You'll see them on rocks. A couple of times when the trail goes through town, you know, you'll see them on a wall, maybe even on the road or a path or something like that. So the only reason we really take guidebooks, although it's nice to look at a map and, you know, look at the contours and see roughly what sort of terrain's coming up. They have a lot of other information in them as well. Water sources, for example, is
right. Yeah, really important.
Yeah, very important. Camping spots, possibly. Road crossings where you can sort of plan to get off and resupply with food. Mm-hmm. I guess water sources is the most important thing. You know, you obviously need to plan around when your water's coming up during the day, because it's, you know, you essentially you can't hike without water. You can go for a few days without food, but certainly not water. The elevation graph is the other important thing. We always sort of check water, and we always sort of check elevation, because we know just by looking at the elevation graphs how tough the day is going to be, or conversely how easy the day is going to be.
Right. So a bit of mental preparation as well, either be it the night before or the sort of the morning you wake up. Yeah.
And if you're, you know, if you're sort of walking with, if you sort of get into a group or maybe one other person or two or three other people, it was never a sort of a strict sort of regime, although people like walking with each other. It's kind of a loose arrangement, you know. Nobody wants to live in each other's pockets. They want a certain amount of space as well. Sometimes you just want to be yourself for a day and walk on your own. But, you know, sometimes the previous evening when, you know, you've eaten, you sit around a campfire, something like that, it wasn't a strict planning as if someone would say, okay, where are we heading tomorrow? We've got to get to this point. It was never like that. It's more of a, you know, any idea, Fozzie, where you think you might be heading tomorrow evening, or where you might be having lunch? Have you figured out any good camp spots, that sort of
Sure.
thing? So people will throw in their opinions, and, you know, other people will take that. And basically at the end of that conversation, most people know where most people are heading at the end of the evening. So you kind of work your day around that if you're sort of walking in with a group. I would generally try and do 15 miles before lunch once I was into the swing of things, and I'd probably take a break about every couple of hours, about 15-minute break, just to have some water and sort of have some snacks, that sort of thing.
It sounds like it's social when you want it to be. Can you talk about one or two of the people that you met? I'm sure it sounds like you might have bumped into a few.
The lovely thing about through hiking is you've got the option to either socialise with others or stay by yourself. And I mean, me personally, I do enjoy, strangely, the solitude of through hiking. I could quite happily go for 2 weeks and not see another soul, which,
sure,
you know, when you talk to other people about that, it's kind of surprising. And they say, well, how the hell can you do that? You know, don't you go nuts or anything? And no, it's because you get, you know, in your day-to-day interactions during your normal life, you obviously talk to an awful lot of people during the day, whether it's face-to-face or on the phone, and it's just nice. It sounds a bit brutal, but it's just nice to get away from it. And the solitude thing for me is a huge draw. Not so much on the Appalachian Trail because there were so many people doing it, but...
Okay, so it's sort of different in that regard to you mentioned the PCT, the Pacific Crest. Is it different to that, and more people, less people?
Yeah, very much so. I think this year there was about 3,500 registered intended through hikers on the Appalachian Trail. Mm-hmm. When I did the Pacific Crest Trail in 2010, I think there was about 330 over.
Oh, right, okay. So it's to the order of 10, right? Okay.
Yeah. So, the Pacific Crest Trail is a lot more remote as well, so you get less people out for sort of day trips and that sort of thing. So yeah, the opportunity to be by yourself, the opportunities are far more common on the PCT. But equally on the flip side of the coin, it's great to hang out with like-minded people as well. And one of the other things about through hiking is the people you meet are doing exactly the same thing as you do, and they're doing it because they love doing it and they love being in the outdoors. So the chances are you're going to connect with a lot of people. But yeah, there was some incredible characters on all my books, and the Appalachian Trail probably more than any. I mean, there's a few examples. There was a lady called Lady Forward right at the beginning. I probably met her about 3 days in. She was in her early 20s. It was her first major sort of through hike, and we sort of hung around a bit and sort of clicked. And we got to about halfway through, and I remember I was staying at a hostel in a place called Damascus, and I was sharing the room with a few other guys, and she sort of came in, and everyone was in sort of quite joking and jovial moods, and I remember her walking into the room and saying, so who do you think's going to be the first one to finish? Who do you think's going to be the first one to get up to the garden? And the phrase was, the gauntlet has been thrown down.
Yeah, right. That's a red rag to a bull, isn't it? Yeah. Or to several.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And nobody was ever racing to finish except a few. But as soon as she said that, I guess I grabbed the red flag. And although we were never racing, over the next sort of 3 months, we sort of constantly crossed paths. And whenever we crossed paths, she walked past me, I'd sort of hold my hand up with an imaginary gauntlet in my hand, and I'd give it to her, and I'd say, there you go, you've got the gauntlet. And, past her, she'd do an imaginary throwing of the gauntlet back to me, and I'd catch it. And as it turned out, she was the first one up to Katahdin. I think she got up there about a week before I did. And
really?
Yeah, and obviously there's a few emails flying back and forth, after that, and the gauntlet was really heavy. I actually wish you'd carry it up and not me, and all that sort of thing. So she was a funny girl. I've mentioned another person, a guy called Chris Giappini, and his trail name was Juggles for the obvious reason that he was a professional juggler.
Mm-hmm. I think I might have seen a little clip of film of him on your blog or on somewhere. Yeah, I
popped a couple of things up on there, and. It's these are the sort of bizarre characters you meet. I've never met a professional juggler, and he was a fantastic guy. Very easy to talk to, extremely funny. I believe he holds a desire to be a stand-up comedian as well, and he's the sort of guy that could stand up on stage and just look at you and not say anything, and he'd have people in hysterics. Mm-hmm. But I believe he was world champion junior juggler in the year 2000. He was probably about maybe 12 at the time. He took a lot of videos on the way, and he sort of juggled in various different locations, and he normally juggled with a couple of trekking poles and a water bottle, but he had his fire torches, I think he calls them, sent out to him on a couple of occasions, one of which was at the finish, and he was juggling with fire and that sort of thing, and he'd juggle in supermarkets with ping pong balls or anything he could sort of get his hand on, really. So yeah, great guy to know, really, really individual character, and sort of the people you'd probably be friends with for the rest of your life, even if you don't see them that often, because they're in the States.
Yeah, and you've got that, as you say, you've got that it's a powerful affinity, isn't it, that you kind of people as you mentioned before, that you're effectively in a club of other kind of similar crazies in the best possible way, people whose intention it is to do this and to do this quite a serious, a very serious walk, and it's not something that people do every day necessarily. So
podcasting around the world. It's all about getting out and having much more fun.
This is the Outdoor Station.
we are all, or we were blessed with a very generous amount of time to get to know each other as well. I mean, you do get a lot of time to sort of get into people's head, what makes them tick, what do they do, what are their plans, what are their dreams, what are their goals. The same as you. So yeah, it's certainly a great way to meet a lot of people and to get to know them really well.
Is it a green tunnel? Is it are there mountainous bits? What's it like?
Yes, it is a green tunnel.
Okay.
It's a beautiful green tunnel.
Right.
A lot of people have issues thinking about the green tunnel, and a lot of people come off Mount Katahdin at the end and saying, I never want to see a tree as long as I live. I mean, I really like. I sort of grow up. I've grown up down in Sussex, sort of on the base of the South and North Downs, and the South Downs is a very open, sort of rolling downland, basically.
Sure.
There's very little woods or forest up there. So when I want to go up, if I want to take a walk somewhere that's not restrictive, and I go up on the South Downs because I've got that space. Equally, 20 minutes north is the North Downs, and that's a lot more sort of wooded and forested. But it kind of played on my mind a little bit before I went. I mean, at the end of the day, if you've got to walk 2,200 miles and literally 99% of it is in woods, you think, am I going to go mad? Am I going to get fed up with it? Am I going to come back thinking, I never want to see another tree again as long as I live? But I actually loved it. I mean, I love the woods. I love forests. There's just something about them. I don't know what it is, but I loved it. I got up in the morning and, you hop out on the trail from your camp spot and you sort of look up and you're just hemmed in. Literally, even the undergrowth could come up and you'd have a 2 foot wide trail.
Right.
It was sort of less constricting at the start because when we started was the tail end of autumn, and the leaves were still bare. There was no trees, so you could sort of see through the forest a bit. But once spring hit, and certainly summer, when all the foliage was out, you literally don't see an awful lot, and you rely on breaking through the top of the mountains, just above tree line. When we were in the Alpine regions, the White Mountains in Washington, it was mainly pine trees, and when you get up to tree line, they gradually shrink and get smaller. And I guess that's just due to the extreme weather conditions up there. It's obviously colder, it's windier, so they've got to battle to survive. And I guess they get to a certain altitude and say, right, I've had enough. And they stop. I think it's referred to as those short pine trees. I think they're referred to as crumults or something like that.
Okay. Which
is these short, stubby pine trees. But yeah, so you've got essentially 99% of the trail is woods. In the southern states, when you did get on top of the mountains, and I kind of use the words mountains loosely, I think the highest point was about 6,000 feet, but until you get up into the northern AT, you don't really sort of see those mountains. You sort of break out onto the top at maybe 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 feet up, because it's still a fair elevation, but it's not the sort of mountains you sort of picture in the head. They're not wild rocky peaks. They're just, I guess, grassy sort of. They call them balds. In the early stages where the trees stop, you just come out to these big grassy balds, and that's the summit. Sure. And I'm not sure of the origin of them, but I think originally the trees were cleared for livestock grazing, and they sort of upkeep them to this day.
On these bald patches, is that yeah?
Anything from maybe a quarter of an acre to maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 acres. And you'd sort of break through the trees and just see these grassy bolds, and it was always a bit of a treat. As much as I love the woods, it's nice, to get out into the sunlight and the warmth. And
of course, yeah, it makes you appreciate it all the more, I imagine, if you're only getting it once every few days. Yeah,
exactly. And suddenly you feel sort of a little bit less restricted. The wind's in your face, and you've got these beautiful views. And we did always try to camp up there whenever we could. which was always a treat. You know, you could watch the sun go down, watch the sun come up, and if you didn't like it was going to rain or the weather was favourable, we'd just roll the sleeping bag and the sleeping mat out and not bother about the tent. Mm-hmm. So they were always a treat. It's the early stages again, until again you sort of get up to Washington and beyond. You do have rocky sections, but most of it's not mud but dirt, which sort of turns to mud when it rains and the weather turns bad. So it's not a well-groomed path at all. It's rocky, it's rooty, it's muddy, it's uneven, and it has a habit of coming up to a mountain or a hill, and as opposed to some other trails, for example the Pacific Crest Trail, which would switch back up and switch back down, so it's more of a gentle gradient. Mm-hmm. The AT will literally just hit a mountain, it will just go straight up to the top and straight down the other side, and during the ups and during the downs you'll have a series of ups and downs as well. So you'd go up 500 feet, then you go down 200, then you go up 300 and down 100. So it was kind of like I'd say a series of shocks to his teeth, for want of a better expression.
It's quite difficult to sort of pace yourself on that kind of terrain, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you do sort of have a rough idea of what's coming up because of your elevation graph, that sort of thing. But it's a very strenuous physical hike. I possibly got lulled into a false sense of security on it because of the three big hikes over in the States, most people attempt to do the AT first, and I think probably because it's the shortest. Mm-hmm. But compared to, again, the Pacific Crest Trail, I would say the Appalachian Trail is definitely harder. I mean, it's 500 miles shorter, but physically it can be very, very brutal. And, you know, some days you can pull in a 25 to 30 mile day, and some days you can spend the same amount of time doing 9 miles. It's that severe. And especially up the last state, which is Maine, that is where the 100-mile wilderness is. The 100-mile wilderness is basically pretty much the last stretch before you reach Katahdin. You kind of pop out on this gravel road, and then you've got a short 10-mile day where you camp, and then you climb Katahdin. But yeah, the 100-mile wilderness was essentially actually probably one of the easiest sections because it was pretty flat. Most of Maine was very, very rough and very physical. You know, you do get, I suppose for me, it's about 300, 400, 500 miles before the end of a through hike, and I'll be honest and say that you do just want it to finish.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's still enjoyable, but I guess because the finish is in striking distance, you're physically exhausted and mentally as well, which a lot of people underestimate. They think it's all physical, but it's a lot of it's psychological as well. So yeah, you do get to the stage where you just want it to finish.
Sure, that was, I mean, even on my little 500-mile effort in the Pyrenees, that was the last week was the week I found, certainly mentally, was the week I found most kind of surprising. I was all over the place in the last week. It was kind of, I was doing somersaults really, sort of psychologically. It was really peculiar to kind of see the end and then to be walking towards that. It's a really odd feeling. Yeah,
I don't think it's a mileage there. I don't think, you know, you can say, okay, you're going to hit 2,000 miles and then this feeling's going to kick in, you want to finish. It does seem to be, you know, sort of towards the end of a hike, whether it's, you know, as you say, it's 500 miles along the Pyrenees or you know, the Appalachian Trail, or possibly even 100 miles along the South Downs Way, you know, a day before the end. It kind of seems when, you know, the finish is in striking distance, it does seem to kick in. But it's interesting you picked up on as well. A lot of people say similar things. I mean, walking or hiking is just sort of the medium that sort of gets me out here. It's not, I don't sort of do these things to hike. I think the reason I do them is just to spend a very generous amount of time out in wilderness or, you know, semi-wilderness or that sort of thing. just because purely I like being out there. I mean, the Camino came about. I was working out in Greece at a yoga center, and I sort of finished, I think, about the beginning of August, something like that. And having been blessed with a sort of a relatively modest bank account still, I figured I had sort of maybe 3 months money left where I could go and do something before I sort of went back home. And I just bumped into a guy in Heraklion, which is a city on the north coast of...
Yeah, I know it, yeah.
Yeah, I was just chatting to him I think it was a youth hostel, and he said, have you heard of the Camino de Santiago? And it just sort of ticked all the right boxes. Mainly the time span. I knew I had 3 months. The route I did on Camino was 1,000 miles long, which was 3 months was a pretty generous time to do 1,000 miles. But you know, the reason to go out there was to sort of take it easy, try my first through hike, see how I got on with it, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And I honestly didn't have the intention of thinking, you know, I'll do this one, then I'll do another one, then I'll do another one, then I'll do another one. But I enjoyed it so much that I sort of got back home, and strangely enough, I didn't do another walk for 10 years. I mean, I did the Camino about 10 years ago.
Okay, it was that long ago, right.
Yeah, it was, I think, 2002 from memory. And although I enjoyed it, I didn't consciously get back and think, you know, you need to do some more of these. In fact, it was quite the reverse. I got back home and thought, right, you know, it's about time you sort of got a proper job. And,
knuckle down, man.
Yeah, knuckle down, man. And, you know, kind of society's expectations. So I sort of fell into it for a while, and I kind of not battled it. I lived with it for 10 years, and I suddenly realised, you know, 3 years ago that I'd had one, well, definitely the best 3 months of my life. And I started questioning why I wasn't going or planning to do another hike, and why was I, you know, getting up at, you know, whatever time and going to do a job that I particularly didn't enjoy, and leading a life that wasn't really that fulfilling. Essentially, doing something that I didn't really like doing, and why wasn't I doing something that I loved it? Mm-hmm. So that's when I sort of decided to do the PCT, although I didn't set an exact date. Again, it was sort of down to finances. But I mean, the Camino is essentially what kicked everything off, and I guess kind of made me realise that, I don't know, maybe chase your dreams, I suppose, because basically going off for 6 months doing a through hike is not exactly normal, and people do frown upon it.
My thanks to both Keith and David for this interview. Once again, you can find out more about Keith on his website, www.keithfoskett.com. where you'll also find a few free preview chapters from the books he mentions, The Last Englishman and The Journey in Between. Plus, of course, you can see what David Linton has been up to on his website, which can be found at www.selfpowered.net. You might be interested to know that Keith is also on the TGO Challenge taking place in May 2013. So if you're lucky enough to be found walking with him somewhere over those 2 weeks, I'm sure he'll have plenty more stories to tell to keep you entertained. Part 2 will be coming very soon, so keep an eye out for it on the Outdoor Station website or in iTunes. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear more from our extensive free library, please visit the website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk, the home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for outdoors people everywhere.